Hey y'all, welcome back to the Spiritual Fitness Podcast. My name is Phil, and I am so happy that you decided to join in on another wonderful conversation about spiritual fitness and the daily lives of daily people. My conversation today is with my friend Wes, and we unpack his theological background and his story about attending church and what that does for his spiritual fitness and how it impacts really his daily life. In the end, Wes communicates an incredible message about how people are the purpose. So sit back, tune in, and enjoy another episode of Spiritual Fitness. Okay, so let's see. The big thing that I would love to hear your story about, Wesley,
hmm
especially in terms of spiritual fitness, is how did you manage what I would expect to be a stressful transition from your home life and then coming over here to then, go to school and everything else? Like that move for anyone would be difficult. And I'm wondering sort of what that experience was like for you.
Truthfully, it wasn't as difficult as you would think.
Okay.
And it might have been I was just like 19 years old and full of life and excited to be here. But TCU was like a summer camp. It was not difficult at all. They handled the transition for us fantastically. So they brought us on the campus 2 weeks before everyone started. I guess they did that for everyone because there was frog camp or whatever it used to be called. But for international students, it's just called international orientation.
Mm-hmm.
So we came to school 2 weeks early, and it was basically just learning about the culture and meeting other people, meeting TCU staff, kind of
Mm,
learning how life in the States works.
okay.
So I didn't have much of like a transition challenge per se. As far as spiritual fitness, maybe finding a church, that was probably the trickiest part.
Yeah, what was spirituality like growing up com for you?
Grew up in a like Pentecostal type church, so very fiery kind of. It's called Assemblies of God. I think they
Mm,
have it here in the States, but very charismatic, kind of offshoot of Baptist. So
okay.
very spiritual, very fiery sermons.
Mm,
Sundays, the day of the Lord type of deal. So like
mm.
go to church at 8 a.m., come home at 3 p.m.
Oh my gosh, wow. 7 hours
Yeah,
of church
it was intense. Like
with did
an
they serve you
hour.
lunch?
Yeah, it was like an hour and a half of singing just to start. And then like a 2 hour sermon. It's like it's very intense. So that was growing up, and then I went to boarding school in high school, and that was uh British system. So we had an Anglican mass, which was kind of the opposite of that. Just
Dude, that
very
is the
efficient.
exact opposite,
It's
man.
very formal, very procedural, very this
What
is
did
how
you
it
think
goes.
about that transition going from the charismatic, expressive, passionate 7 hour long day to 60 minutes of highly ordered service? What was that like for you?
So some parts of the I don't think I miss any of the 7 hour church. Like I don't think I ever sat down and be like, man, I really miss the super long church services or just spending all Sunday at church. But neither did I care too much for the yeah, let me close my blinds. Like my son's coming in. I can't really see my face. I guess you're not even using the recording, so it doesn't matter. But
It's okay.
anyway,
Still, I get to see your beautiful face. It didn't really speak
I
to you, the Anglican tradition, but you also like didn't miss the 7 hour service.
mhm. But oddly enough, like it seared the hymns from the Anglican Church are like seared into my brain. Like, because you'd get a hymn
Mm,
book and you'd sing hymns from this hymn book all the time, and I was like, it's probably the most religious thing that is Like I know it like the back of my hand still, even without the hymn book, and I still love those hymns. And
Mm-hmm.
surprisingly enough, the church that we go to now, one of the reasons that I was attracted to it is because they sang hymns.
Oh
It's
yeah.
not a major issue, but I like the traditional hymns.
Which for people in our generation is sort of an oddity, because I've had the same thing when we were looking for churches in San Antonio. Um, we went to because I'm Methodist, and so we're like looking at the Methodist churches to choose from, and we go to one, and the sanctuary is like 10% full, and it's the traditional service, and the pastor sort of like runs up to me afterwards and was like, "By the way, we have a contemporary service that's like really full and really great, and you should really come there because like you'll see a lot more people your age and where you're at." Because she's afraid that we're not going to come back because of how empty it is. And I'm like, "No, this was great. I love the
It's
hymns.
good.
I love the service. This is what I want. I don't want the tradition. I don't want the contemporary stuff. Like, give me that
Yeah.
hymnal. Let me open that book and squint my eyes and read that 8-point font and go from there. Those all 4 verses, baby. I want to be able to know what I'm singing. Um, well, this is interesting that we're talking about religion specifically. When I think about spiritual fitness, obviously religion is part of that. Um, but I try to like expand and zoom out a little bit more to focus
Mhm.
on the function of those actions. And so um, let's zoom out just a little bit to this idea of attending a service at a regular time. Um, and what does that do for you?
I didn't consciously think about this right until COVID happened and we didn't go to church like on a constant fashion or in a regular cadence. And it wasn't good not going to church or having some sort of a spiritual or faith. It's like you lose practice in faith. It made me oddly enough appreciate how the Anglicans do it or the Methodists. Like there's spiritual practices they call them, and from coming from the charismatics growing up that way, it was more like this should happen spontaneously. Like you should just feel like feelings of spirituality should just sprout just because
Mm-hmm.
you're alive and you're a Christian. But it's like it left no space for the spiritual disciplines, which in my understanding now as I'm getting older, I'm like, no, it actually makes a very big difference if you
Mm.
go to church, if you say your prayers. And like I used to think like prayers similar to church attendance or anything of the sort would be like a spontaneous sort of deal. Like if I just sit down, I'll be like some super monk and I'll get like super spiritual mode. It's like, no, I like how the Anglicans did. It's like, here's your prayer. Like say this prayer. Saying this prayer every day. It is a very useful thing as far
Mm.
as spiritual fitness or health is concerned, because it puts you in the habit or mindset at least of being receptive and being able to get spiritual things. So
Mm.
this is the first step is you have to develop a spiritual discipline that kind of opens you up to getting more in depth per se. You can't just spontaneously.
Just feel it. Well, like the
Yeah.
connection that I'm hearing is like this is why I keep going back to this like spiritual fitness element of how
Mm-hmm.
approaching it more like you do your physical fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you are waiting for the moment to feel led to go to the
Yeah.
gym, you ain't ever going, man. At least not on a regular basis. And if you're waiting
True.
to feel called to go run and be in the mood to do so, it's going to happen once in a blue moon. But
Mm-hmm.
versus the discipline of I exercise whether or not I want to on this schedule, and I take only exception when it's absolutely necessary. Like that's discipline. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm hearing you describe how when when COVID happened and you were forced to break that discipline, that you recognized, is it like something you sort of took for granted? Is that right?
I just never thought about it. I never thought about the connection that, oh, this is actually a spiritual discipline that is absolutely necessary. Like in the Bible, it talks about, like I think it's in Hebrews, when he's saying that some of you have gotten in the habit of not meeting with your brother. I think it's, I forget the exact verse. I think it's at the end of Hebrews.
Okay.
And it's like an admonishment, like, hey, make sure you're meeting with your brothers. Like, it's not good to not go to service. And I never really thought of it as a necessary discipline coming from like a, my mindset was formed in the charismatic church, which I didn't even
Mm,
realize, like going to church every Sunday and doing that, like that was a discipline. But when COVID happened and you weren't going to church, like, okay, wait, what happened to my faith? Like,
right.
it's weird. It was just like fitness, like you mentioned. It's like, wait, it's been a year since I've hit the gym. Whoa.
Yeah. And
I'm
then
huffing and puffing walking up the stairs. It's like, what just happened?
exactly, right? And like there
Mm,
it is again, like the stairs of life where there are plenty of things that happen where life happens, and if you're out of shape and can't handle it, then you know it's too late to start going to the gym, at that point,
mhm,
versus taking the time to develop that spiritual endurance, and then from there, when you do face the hills of life or anything like that, you're able to conquer it and overcome it. Um, so sorry, I'm actually very distracted right now because I'm sitting in my car and there's a guy who's, I think he's having a good time, but I can't tell if he's either happy or if he's like losing his mind. He's like running
Oh,
around and like yelling and
and
oh
it's
he's
like in his front yard.
oh no, he's drunk and he's peeing in the street.
Oh, get out of here.
Yeah, these
Oh
oh my
my
God.
goodness.
It's
Oh my
8:15
goodness.
in the morning. Oh my goodness. These
Is
guys
he
are
just
having it.
getting home?
I'm thinking he's just getting home. Man, this is great. I'm
Oh
gonna really
no.
make sure I add this part of the part of the podcast. I'm so distracted right now. Um, I'm not
Wait,
gonna even.
is it your dad's like across the street neighbor?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I didn't see the guy pull up, but the car's parked and it's like literally across from us. But anyway, I think that he's drunk. The guy's definitely drunk, and he's coming home from his evening of debauchery, and he's
Oh,
in the
night
driver's
of.
seat. Oh God, he's in the driver's seat. He just closed the door,
Oh
and
no.
oh, I
Does your
hope he
dad know
doesn't.
him?
I don't know. No, yeah, we don't know him.
Hmm.
We've had the folks move in. Okay, well, I'm
Hmm.
just more concerned about the fact that this guy's going to get behind the wheel.
He's about to
Um,
start driving.
he's about to start driving. Um,
Oh no.
I hope not. I don't see the car on. Okay. Anyways, back to spiritual fitness. So, um, and we're back, y'all. Um, so you're talking about the habits of like going to a service and like it's a weekly thing. What are some like other benefits that you've found from just attending a weekly service? And again, not about from like the theology belief point of view, but like thinking about like, the delayed gratification of getting up and going to service and then leaving. Like, how do you feel afterwards, or what has it provided you when you've like needed that spiritual endurance?
Frankly, I think from my standpoint, it would be impossible to separate the theological or spiritual or faith benefits from that. Like this, the psychological benefits or health benefits, like those in my mind are secondary to the faith that happens because it's a renewal of my faith. Every Sunday you go to church, it's like, okay, you've had a or Bible study or what have you. It's like for a second, it gives you that stopgap, that hey, reset.
Mhm.
This is what's important in life. Hey, there's other humans here going through the same struggles that you're going to, even different struggles, but they're all still here in humility, asking for God's help.
Mm,
That kind of mental reset, and I think it's very much a faith thing. It's like, okay, here's how my week went. I get a chance to stop, reflect, think back how it went, say a prayer, say a prayer of gratitude, say a prayer of repentance, get to be with other people, human beings, and that just kind of resets your faith, or what's the edifies your faith, and has other benefits like the psychological benefits, like, well, you got to stop and not be the center of your existence, which
Mm.
is an absolute
That's
benefit. It's like,
important.
yeah, because sometimes our life, we're like, I was reading this morning, like humans, we're slaves to like the immediate ordinary around us, like any to our senses. Like we rarely stop and think about what we're doing or the big picture, because like, "Oh, I'm hungry, I need a cup of coffee. Baby needs a diaper change. I need to go to work. I need to respond to this email. I'm so tired, I just need to watch a movie and go to bed. Wake up in the morning, oh God, I'm so tired. I need a cup of coffee. I need to get to work. I need to respond to these emails. I need to do this. I need to do this. Like we never stop and think about it. And then it's like, goodness gracious, I'm 31, turning 32. You kind of start thinking about these things like, well, I'm closer to 40 than I am to 20. It's like, okay. You start thinking about things like, shoot, life's moving very quick, like very, very quick.
Mm, man, I think you just gave me a heart attack. Oh gosh, that hits so hard, and I totally agree with you, Wes. That idea of what was it, being a slave to the present?
Yeah, like we
That
just,
for me, I like another one to describe it is like sometimes I wonder if I'm just a bipodal stomach. I am just a walking mouth. That's what I just
yeah,
want. Just constantly just consuming and shitting, and like that's all I am.
that's
And
it.
I'm just moving from one thing to another to occupy my mouth until until I'm unsatiated, so that I can become satiated once more, and then just repeat this endless freaking cycle. Um, and I feel more like an animal sometimes than I do like an enlightened creature. And it's in those moments that yes, that uh, spirituality, spiritual fitness, beliefs, faith, theology are what help break free from the shackles of my stomach, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, and
Yeah.
live for that sort of higher sense of purpose, that higher sense of meaning, and that higher sense of community, which is the defining marks of spirituality, because anybody can have meaning and purpose and community in life. Just go to social media and you can find a group and join it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they can define your worldview and define your purpose in life. But the things that are lasting, that are everlasting, actually, um, come from something that is beyond us. Um, and tapping into those sources, like you're saying, on a regular basis, even if it's just once a week or for an hour, can be enough to reorient, refresh, and build, edify, build you up. It's
Mm-hmm.
not just a restoring; it's actually a building as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
I don't know, maybe it's just getting older or kind of learning proper theology. Growing up, there wasn't much good theology. Like looking back at the charismatic sort of church upbringing, I'm like, I wish they like were better. They had very good intentions, and I don't doubt that they were Christians and loved God and tried the best they could. But just the level of theological knowledge and education was not there. It was basically like every Sunday was a you know go to the altar type. So like that was the only part of faith that kind of mattered. But growing up now, and this ties into our edification discussions, like again, this the importance of disciplines, like sanctification part of our journey, which is now till we physically die,
Mm.
is like where you need constant transformation and formation of virtues,
Hmm.
kind of turning. our souls getting turned or oriented properly little by little. And it's almost impossible to do that without daily, laborious, oftentimes, disciplines. That's just like working out. It's like it's like the idea of it, the inspiration part is like fun, and it's like you get dopamine from just thinking about, yeah, I'm gonna go work out, but getting up in the morning and doing it is not. It's like it's
Hmm.
laborious and it's dry and it's hard.
Yes, right. And it's only after a while of like resetting those habits and overcoming the negative habits that that labor then becomes enjoyable, because like you begin to realize what the secondary benefits are. Um, and that just takes time, because yes, if this goes back um to the greatest, the one of the world's like longest stories of behavior change, which is the difference between being motivated versus being disciplined. And if you rely on motivation, then you fall, because if you don't feel motivated, then you won't. Versus if you rely on discipline, you always will, because discipline doesn't care about your feelings. And that's like Jocko Willis. That's
Mhm.
what's his name? Who's the runner guy? Who
Goggins.
lost all the weight? Goggins. You know, that's the David Goggins dude who ran a marathon just for the hell of it, and just was pushing through regardless of the fact that, like, you know, he was shitting his pants and his feet were bleeding and everything. The ultimate of overcoming negative feelings and pushing through it. So let's connect there. In your daily life, what is it? Just for all of my listeners, all one of them.
Hmm.
What is it that you do?
Michaela.
What's your Man, my wife, not even my wife listens to this.
The chameleon, she can't
I'm
help it. Just like,
I'm the listener. I am the listener. Um, what is it that you do? Like, what's your daily life? If I met you on the street and I was like, "Hey, who are you?"
I'll just
Introduce
give you
yourself to me.
a schedule. Typically, I'll get up, go to the gym before I hit the office, and go in the office. And it's usually pretty long days, so get done at the office about 7, drive home 7:30, have dinner with the family, clean up, read a book or watch a TV show, go to bed, restart.
Wow.
It's a very stoic.
What what time do you go to bed and what time do you wake up?
About I'd say 11:30 going to bed, and 5:36 wake up.
Mm-hmm. And you start work at like 8.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you're working almost 11-hour days, 5 days a week.
yeah, it's pretty. And it's just, I guess this past year has been that. So we'll see how
Okay.
next year is.
What is it that you do?
I'm an engineer, so I'm designing data centers. Is really
Mm,
what I'm doing. Designing and
um,
building data centers.
you're saying
That's
that this
taking off
only,
right now.
I was going to
So
say,
this,
this is
mhm.
AI stuff is big.
Yeah, so it's the arms race. It's like everyone wants to have the world's biggest supercomputer. So it's like move, 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 move.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we're just trying to keep up with the demand.
Uh, if you're saying that within a year ago you weren't working these hours and lately you have, I mean, how has that impacted you?
It's tough. It gets old quick. It's like okay, it's a lot of working, a lot of working. But uh, silver lining is I enjoy the people I work with, so
Mm,
that makes it bearable. And the work we do is hard, and that's exciting too. That's a draw to it. It's like we're in the Super Bowls of engineering consulting, so it's like the world's biggest projects. So the world's biggest feats of engineering. So that's very cool. Being
wow.
part of kind of the forefront, like you said, the AI stuff, it requires a lot of power, and it's just a gigantic operation to have machines that could spit out human-like responses that are mostly correct in a matter of seconds. To do
Mhm.
that requires a lot from the back then two layers behind computing is the infrastructure layer is gigantic. It takes a lot of power and a lot of computers all working in unison to give you
Really?
that. Mm.
When I've read about that where they say how much like energy data centers really use. Like, but I don't really I can't appreciate what they mean by when they say that. So can you make an analogy or comparison to help me understand how much energy we're talking?
So, like, I'm working on a data center now, just one data center, about 300,000, 400,000 square feet, uses as much electricity as the city of Seattle, like the whole city of Seattle.
What?
Mm.
One data center, 300 to 400,000 square feet, which is like how I don't really know how big that is. That's like a city block.
I'd
That's
say
like a Walmart,
no, smaller.
smaller
So,
than a Walmart, like a Walgreens.
so like Walmart's big. Like maybe if because this was multiple stories, so like if you just took like the whole Walmart floor, that might
Yeah,
be it. Like
yeah, the
that
whole
might be.
floor. Because right, they build these things up so it's multiple layers.
Hmm.
So the the floor space of a Walmart, but stacked on top of itself,
Hmm.
uses more energy than, or the same amount of city as the city of Seattle.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That's wild, man. That is wild. Um, but I can see why you enjoy it because of like you were saying, it challenges you and the relationship thing. And I've known you for we've known each other technically for 12 years. I
It's
was talking
crazy.
about this right with the other TCU people. Like we've known each other for over a decade and um, really met each other at a crucial part of our personal development, and then have kind of really grown up together. Um,
Mm.
I've always known you to be a relational person, someone who, when you kind of come into the room lights up, and you just kind of connect people. You remind me as someone who, like, no one's dancing at the party, and then like Wesley, one person will try and get on the floor and like dance, and like no one will want to, but like if you step on the dance floor, everybody's getting on the dance floor with you. And I imagine that you take that to your work. And I'm also hearing how that's not just something that's particular to friends, but it also comes from your spiritual background too. The sense of community, the sense of relationships. So, where do you think that what do you get out of the relationship side of things? Like, how does that serve you or benefit you, or what does it do for you? These relationships that you've built and cherished and nourished.
So I think I'll answer it in two ways. First part, I'd say like origins.
Mm,
I'd say partly I think it's a personality type deal. Like you're just born an extrovert and like to be around people. I think that's 100% God just created certain people this way and certain people more kind of thoughtful, focused. My wife's one of them. She's a very likes very deep interactions, like very deep one-on-one. Like go sit at a coffee shop for 3 hours. Type of
yep,
interaction.
I can
And like
confirm that's true.
and secondly, I think my mother's and father's side of the family, so growing up, they had a very strong emphasis on community and being in a sense that human beings are the most important thing. That human beings are the point.
Mm.
People are the reason. And it wasn't like ever explicitly stated, but it was just how they lived their lives. It's like
Can
you're
you think
kind of
of an
not
example, like growing up, that
there.
you saw?
Like my grandma, she's not, she wasn't a wealthy woman by any means. Like she was actually dirt poor. I think she is the definition of
Like
dirt
literally
poor.
dirt poor.
Yeah, yeah. But she was still very, 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 very generous. Like she'd go sell her crops and then she'd be coming home from the market and she'd stop by her neighbor's house and make sure that their kids had food and had their school fee taken care of. And she didn't have anything per se. And she didn't care to accumulate stuff or wealth, or it's like, what's the point of all that stuff? If you have to tell our family, or my mom
Mm.
particularly, she used to say, make sure that when you die, people don't lie at your funeral. Like the good things people say about you are actually they
Dude, words of
actually
wisdom, man.
they actually mean that. So I'd say that's probably where my personality comes from. So it is by no means, I think, something that I could take any credit for. I think
Mm.
one, God made me that way, and two, it's just a good upbringing.
Mm.
I do think that we ought to practice, and I'm not saying being an extrovert, I'm saying just treating people as they really are, that is, eternal beings. Like every person you talk to is an eternal being, like with the potential to be either an eternal God in quotes, like not God, but like an eternal positive being oriented towards God, or a devil, like an eternal being pointed towards hell. And you want to help, if you can, help people around you be pointed towards
Mm-hmm.
God, not by like admonishing them, but by how you treat them. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's like the actual spiritual maturity part of it. And I don't think I'm there yet. I'm just kind of starting to like even crystallize a thought in my mind of what that means or looks like. It's like you have to be conscious about it. And I can't take any credit for a good upbringing. There's plenty of
Mm-hmm.
people who, in the final analysis, probably haven't treated people as well as I have, but I didn't have to, well, as
You're
well
good.
as they could have. I'm not trying to say I'm treating people well.
Don't worry, you're fine. I saw that. I was like, you're not bragging. It's okay.
Yeah. But like, if you look at their upbringing, they were raised by total, like cruel people. And like
Mm.
the good deeds that they do required so much more effort of the will, to where like when we get to heaven and all our like clothes are taken off, it's like you weren't that good because of any effort of yours. You were that good just because you were raised well and God gave you a good like mental disposition. This
Mm.
person had everything against them, and they had to work really, really hard to do even the little good that the rest of us humans see as little. But in reality,
Mm.
it's like this person might have really put in significant effort of the will to
Mm.
get there. And I guess that's why
Mm-hmm.
the Bible says don't judge, because we judge by our standards, but it's like you don't know. If you have the same upbringing and like mental or physical kerfuffles that said person has, I'm not sure that we'd be better than they are.
Yeah. Um, this this like touches on the age-old question of like, what's the influence of nature versus nurture,
Mhm.
and then the role of our own free will to make those choices. Um, and you know, you, the reflection I'm hearing you offer is about how you realize that you were dealt a pretty good hand,
Mhm.
both the hand that God gave you and then also the hand that your parents gave you. And so if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost as if you're saying like, well, it was actually pretty easy for me to turn out to be a nice guy that loves people because it's just sort of how things turned out for me.
I I would say yes, definitely the product of a good upbringing.
Hmm.
Basically, it was no effort of my own. Like I was never consciously like
Hmm.
this is something I am dedicated to learning and doing.
Well, let me push back on that a little bit then, because like you do bear some responsibility because, a lot of psychology can say, you can look, why is it that, you have the same upbringing, the same nurture environment, um, but you have disparate outcomes, which is based off of like the nature side of things, but,
Mhm.
you still bear responsibility for your choices. Like, um, I would like to say that, you've still chosen to be a good person, and you've chosen to be nice, and you've chosen to pursue those things. Um, and it's not just simply because, you were wired that way. Like, you do deserve a little bit of credit, Wes. Maybe just a little, not a lot, but maybe just, there you go, a little back there. Just give you a little self-care. Yeah. Yeah, man. Um, so with all of that, with all that said, this idea about like how you're raised and the nurturing and the relationships and like what this does for you, you're also revealing a lot of how your your worldview, which is informed by your spiritual fitness, gives you this sense of humility and can help explain your story. You're describing an upbringing in which you've mentioned God and how you believe that you were created, and so there's this sort of connection there. And then I also heard you say how you strive, or you're beginning to scratch the surface of engaging and receiving other people as more than just non-player characters, NPCs, in your Animus Matrix experience, but rather other true human beings where you see the potential of being who they are, because of the randomness of how selection provided you who you are, meaning you realize, this is what I'm hearing, so step in, please. But it sounds like it's this idea that um, rather than seeing people as like, well, they're completely different from me, it sounds like you're trying to see more of you in them, more of the potential of you could have turned out like them if you were dealt the same personality and turned out the same environment. So let's not judge that person. Is
Right.
that
In that
kind of
sense, in the sense of judging, in the sense of judging, but in the sense of seeing them as humans, it's more like, wow, this is someone who God created. And as a Christian, this is someone who God sent his only son to die for. Like every single person you meet, the
mm-hmm,
homeless guy on the street, the drug addict, the murderer, like, my goodness, these are
mm-hmm,
eternal beings. These are
mm-hmm,
absolutely every single one of them. And it's very weighty. I don't think about it often enough. Like that's why I like part of Drew Talk is spiritual fitness is sitting with friends like this and talking about things higher than our senses or
or
being
TCU football.
walking, but yeah, or just because it kind of forces you to think about things beyond us and to
Mm-hmm,
and in regards to how I'm seeing people, I accurate what you said in terms of try not to judge them because you don't
mm-hmm,
know what raw material that
mm,
they were dealt. Like you don't know how much effort it
yeah.
takes. And by judge, I don't mean like don't have standards. I mean I'm not God. that's,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I mean.
Like, don't judge as in don't be so quick to write off,
Exactly.
in a
Exactly.
way,
Don't
or
condemn
dismiss.
anyone to hell. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
You don't know.
Pretty much.
I got a perfect case study for you. This happened literally yesterday. So I work, as a chaplain at a pediatric hospital, and my units, one of them include pediatric oncology, so kids with cancer. And walked into a room with a mom and kid. The kid's, elementary school age, and she's not feeling, obviously not feeling well, and is not much
Hmm.
interested in having a conversation. But a lot of my work is with the parents, because it's the parents of kids with cancer who really suffer,
Hmm.
more than almost any other case, because of this chronic disease that, I don't need to explain it. So I'm
Hmm.
talking with her and everything, and she's being polite and kind, and she's answering my questions, get to know you, X, Y, and Z. And then I transition. A lot of my work is that I ask open-ended questions to see if
Hmm.
people, on their own free will, their own natural sense, will answer in a way that
Hmm.
includes spirituality. So I'll say things like, what gives you peace? Or what do you turn to for hope? And someone will
Hmm.
say, oh, I go to church and I believe in God, or I go to the mosque and, and I believe in
Hmm.
Allah, or they'll say these things. Or they'll say, well, my family, and my relationship with my husband is what
Hmm.
gives me hope. And it's like, okay, that's true. Because if I say to them, do you believe in God? They'll say yes or no, but they may not actually
Mhm.
like find meaning there. Okay. So with all
Mhm.
that, she's not giving me anything. And so I then just kind of point blank say, is prayer useful to you? And she stops because she has to think about that. And she's like, yeah, prayer's really useful to me. And then she starts breaking down and she's crying and she's talking about how exhausted she is and how she's been praying to Jesus for strength because she feels like she's going to break. And she opens up and describes to me how her husband had an accident in work and broke his arm, and so he can no longer work and provide for the family. And as they were fixing the fracture in his arm, they did a blood sample and they discovered cancer, and they're trying to figure out if he has cancer in the blood or in his bones. And so not only does her daughter have cancer, but her husband might also have cancer. And she's sitting there, just calm and collected as a peach. And if I had not asked her that one question, she wouldn't have even opened up to all those things. It's just
My
right.
goodness.
Everything underneath the surface, eternal human being who is holding all of
My
that, and you would
goodness.
never know.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, for instance, said person, you're at a line on a store and they explode at the store people, and you're like, oh my God, look at that terrible human being. Like that's kind of not judging. It's like, could you imagine? I would, I wouldn't, I don't know that I'd have my marbles about. I'd have gone crazy. Like in that situation, like I don't have strength like that woman.
Mm,
Wow, wow, that is.
yes. A
Yeah,
year
I think you
ago,
have a. Yeah, go ahead.
this family was fine and normal. A year ago, literally, they didn't have the cancer diagnosis and the husband was working. A year ago, life was exactly like today is for you and me, just normal. And then in the span of like 3 months, it just all collapsed and fell around them. And it's been a year of trying to like hold on and getting through it one day at a time. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, dude, that is, jeez. This world, there's a lot of suffering in this world. And sometimes it's like, it can't make sense. It's so hard to make sense of it. This past, I guess, winter or fall, we have like a Bible study at our church, and it kind of goes with semesters. So this past semester was the study of Job.
Mm,
It's kind of a very frustrating book. Like he never finds out why he suffered. Like God never reveals to him the reason for his suffering. He just like basically tells him to be quiet. Like you're not God. You don't know, and it's not your business to know why you suffer. It's like, oh
mm.
God, it's absolutely terrifying. Like how do you tell that woman? How do you encourage her? Like,
Yeah. Um, the way that I encouraged her is that I looked at her, um, and I told her, uh, I validated her feelings. I said, "This is hard. I, um, I can't imagine how difficult this is. So difficult, and I can see how hard this is. You are going through probably the hardest thing that anyone could imagine going through, and here you are, and and you feel like it's breaking you down." I'm just sort of repeating what she's saying to me, and I'm acknowledging it. I'm acknowledging the suffering, and I'm looking at it with her. I'm not trying to diminish it. I'm not trying to like, water it down or make it go away by offering her like cheap words of consolation.
mm-hmm,
I just sat in the suck with her and said, yes, this sucks. This is terrible. And I hate that you're going through this. And I don't understand why you're going through this either. Um, the words of encouragement that I offer is that then I say, but God is faithful and and God is with you in this. And your faith has gotten you this far, and it will continue to get you further. And then I just sort of let her kind of go from there.
mm-hmm,
That's what I offer. It's those sorts of things that it's those like you're talking about that higher sense of um, present mindfulness.
you have a very hard job, but I also think in a weird way, I couldn't do your job. It, Amy has a similar job where she sees suffering a lot with children, and I couldn't do it. Like my spirit would break, and I'd be like a depressed person very quickly. I don't have the maturity or strength to deal with or to see suffering like that and deal with
Mm,
it. Like, but in a weird way, it's it keeps you human, very human. Like as an engineer, I'm working with buildings, and there's a temptation to forget like the people I'm working with are humans. It's just like, and I work in a corporate business. Like people are like, they're I'm not saying anything against capitalism, but
right.
like pushed to an extreme, it's like or devoid of a backstop, meaning a worldview or something that puts value on humans, they could quickly turn into just like units of production. And like you don't see the human here. It's like, okay, how many dollars did said person generate for the business
Hmm.
today? But working in professions like yours, where it's like doctors of the soul or like soul caretakers,
Mm.
it's a very big responsibility, but it also reminds you like what we are just talking about, like people are the point. Like our whole existence, it's like for humans, it's for people.
Mm. And to wrap it up, because this is the full circle part moment, like I love that phrase, people are the point. And in your line of work, I think that more people can relate with what you're talking about than I think that, yeah, I think people like your experience of working typically with numbers and data and objective information um, is more of the common thread than it is the kind of people to people side of things in the caregiving industry, because even like medical doctors and nurses are taught to objectify, are taught to kind of be in this place, even if you do have the human contact. So, what advice would you give to help people um, stay centered on people are the reason, people are the purpose, and not get too lost in the data, the numbers, the dollars, the cents, the present?
A very pragmatic, practical approach. Go to church. Like as odd and unsexy as it sounds, unspiritual, on start somewhere.
Okay.
Like remind yourself that your life is not about you. Like you're not a god, and money's not a god either.
Mm.
Find a church, and what that does, it kind of like it's like, hey, there's more to life, and I have to remind that myself often because I could see myself going that way. It's like being constantly worried about money and what are we gonna do here, and it's like no, if you go to your grave with nothing, but you've turned people's soul toward heaven or just made people see the good and want to be good, then that's what matters. Yeah,
Mm.
so go to
Yeah,
church
man.
and say your prayers.
Simplest is best. Find a spiritual fitness center and get
Mm,
that membership and start going regularly. And then the
yeah,
rest of it will kind of take. You can't get fit if you don't go to the gym.
yeah.
You can't just think about it all day long. You got to freaking do something about it. So get off your butt, and wherever it is that you find God, go there and try to make it a regular habit, and then the rest of it will kind of take care of itself.
Mm-hmm. It came back full circle from the first sentence of the recording till now. It's like that's the point, spiritual fitness.
Yeah, man.
Get after it.
Well, Wes, thanks so much for taking time to meet with me in my call and my podcast. And to all the listeners, tune in next week for another exciting conversation.